that you wouldn't all otherwise be familiar with. So we're going to go over some things with argument. Reason for that is it's going to kind of match up, or maybe not match up is the best word, but at least relate to what we're doing. So far as that DRQ question that we were looking at yesterday, remember that one, we're not turning it into an essay assignment that you're going to be working on later, but we're simply just kind of familiarizing yourself with a bunch of different types of argument questions that show up on an AP exam. And again, not solely for AP exam, but so that you can effectively put together an argument, because you're going to be doing that for the next 50, 60, 70 years of your lives. The stuff down below, reminders, nothing new there. You have your Bedford Reader articles that you're going to read for Friday. You probably are okay waiting until Thursday night if you want to do that. Your schedule better than I do. We'll do reading check quiz, and then we'll discuss those two articles in good detail. And then Monday, you're reading through chapter 16, not to chapter 16, but through chapter 16 to page 122 with Catcher in the Rye. For anyone who started reading, any questions about Catcher? It's so good.
It's so fun. I was cracking up last night.
Ryan and Alex don't have that same reaction.
It's so good. It's like one of our kids.
That's the scary part. For me.
Yeah.
I think it's funny.
I mean, not all of us are wondering.
Alex is apparently ready to strangle Holden. Could be maybe Alex is one of those morons that Holden doesn't like.
I thought that was used to be
Yeah, well, and I think it's true with any kind of book. Usually, you probably need to be I don't think there's a set percentage, whether it's 20% or a quarter of the way through as things kind of start to pick up. I think with East of Eden, that definitely would hold true. Problem with East of Eden is 20% of the way through is 120 pages or so. The one thing one thing about Catcher, and this isn't necessarily a positive or a negative, the way it is the way that it pretty much is throughout the whole entire thing, which you probably will like, maybe at this point. Some people read it and will go, what's the plot? And that question might not even be answered on page 214. Doesn't mean therefore it's bad, but that's something that we're usually looking for, okay, what's the conflict and all that kind of stuff that's going on. So it's certainly different in that regard. But if you have any questions, between now and Monday, let me know. Tomorrow, just giving you, information about it. There's going to be a prompt when you come in. There won't be lined paper next to it, so you're okay in that regard. It's going to be another argument question from an AP exam. Rather than 1997, we're going to go with 2019. So you'll see the one that the seniors did last year. And the reason I'm going with that one is two things. One, lets you see what a recent one looked like. Is there any difference in structure? And the other thing, too, is it's a total, obviously it's going to be a different prompt, but I think the way that you would approach it is totally different from the Huxley-Orwell one. I think the Huxley-Orwell one has a English class feel to it. I think the one from last year doesn't, or at least not as much. So you can kind of see both sides of that coin. With the analyzing argument, in some ways, I don't really know what to call the notes section. Analyzing argument, I used to call it elements of persuasion, which I wrote on the board, I think on your weekly syllabus. This is stuff to keep in mind both while you are analyzing someone else's argument, and also while you're kind of creating your own. So the first part, we're going to kind of go over just the ways that people tend to create arguments, very simplistic kind of stuff, hopefully with a little bit of review. The second half is more of, these are the things that you don't want to do, which would be logical fallacies. Paige is in argumentation, so she's already kind of familiar, although there are some, I think there's at least one, maybe two, that we didn't talk about. So there'll be some new stuff, but things that you want to try to stay away from when you're trying to create an argument, whether it be speaking or writing. So that's what we're looking at. Any questions? We had technology glitches galore first period, so we got the bugs out. Maybe. Wasn't as bad as the announcements, but we blamed Ryan. When in doubt, blame him. You didn't miss anything. Well, you missed the intro song, and that was about it. If you did want to follow along on iPad, I do have this posted at the top of the stream, and it's also under AP Exam Prep. So it's the Google Slides version, which basically is going to be the same content. Formatting might be a little bit different. When we get to the fallacy part, that's probably when I'll kind of speed things up a little bit. Oh, tests. Since I still see Scantrons, pass those things back to you. Scantron is yours to keep. Obviously, you can see which ones are marked correct or incorrect. If you want to take a look at a test sometime, let me know. Probably a lunch or study hall is the best time to do it, because I'll still have the copies of the test, but I keep that to myself. Remember, the percentage that shows up on your Scantron is not the percentage that is in Power School, because your Power School rate's out of 40 as opposed to 45. So for most of you, it's probably around like a 9% increase that would be in Power School as opposed to here. It's bad when I go, it's a 9% decrease in Power School. That would be very bad. All right, this is the part that I hope to review. Ethos, pathos, logos. Dylan, seem like review. Maddie, seems like review. Not to be confused with Legos, toy. You like those? Logos, logic, very different thing. Although there's some logic in building Legos. Yeah. Here's a couple things with how this is kind of written out here. I'm trying to look at this from the stance as you being a writer, because most of your arguments that you're going to be doing are going to be written word, essay form, things like that, as opposed to verbal that would be taking place in a speech, debate, or conversations that you have with parents and loved ones and unloved ones that you feel like yelling at every now and then. Essentially what we mean by ethos is we're looking at an ethical appeal, although credibility might be a word that could resonate with you a little bit more. Pathos, emotional appeal, logos, logical appeal. These are the two here with ethos and pathos that people tend to confuse because they'll go ethos, emotion, like how you go logos and logic, and misrepresent those two. Ethos, you're looking at the writer's credibility. This isn't really something that you create by the way that you write. And unfortunately, no offense to anyone in this room, you don't really have it. Not that you're uncredible, but you don't really have credibility that's going to build up and help you out. And I say this thinking like forward with an AP exam. When May 13th rolls around and you write your DRQ answer for any of the essays, and then it gets read by a random English teacher from Topeka, Kansas, in Daytona Beach, Florida, they have no idea who you are. So they're not going to go, oh, this is Brady's essay. Can't stand that kid. He's not going to pass no matter what. Or it's Ryan. Yay, we like Ryan. So let's give him, a 6. They don't know who you are. They don't know anything about you. So it's totally objective. You could, in theory, maybe build up some credibility based on the way that you write, but that's not something that is probably going to happen. So from a writing standpoint, this one could be a little bit difficult. Pathos. Appeal to the reader's emotion. Could be fear, could be guilt, could be pride, could be love, could be patriotism, could be paranoia, could be a whole bunch of things. A word that I tend to utilize with pathos or associate with pathos is manipulation, which has a horrible connotation to it. We're going to manipulate Asia. And then go in with some kind of emotional appeal. But you're trying to get a sway based on the reader's emotion. That's really hard for you to do as a writer. Any idea why?
Because you're not there.
Yeah, and it's not meaning that it's impossible. But if you're speaking to someone and you try to start off with a joke, you can usually tell, did it work or did it not, based on the reaction. Stella doesn't know what's going on while I'm reading her essay at 9:30 at night. And so if she went with a emotional kind of appeal or style thinking it would work the whole way through and it doesn't work initially, she doesn't have the opportunity to change the game plan mid-essay because it's already done. Whereas if you're doing a debate and Sasha gets realize what's working with the audience or what's not working with the audience, she then kind of parlay that into a different approach throughout the rest of the essay or the rest of the speech. So it's kind of difficult to do with the writing thing. It's also kind of difficult because when you're dealing with an argument question, you really want to have a logical approach that's going on. We think of pathos as being persuasive, that it's still a little kind of empty or hollow. Logos is where the money is so far as the way that argument's going to be said, because we're looking for reason. Doesn't mean you have to have statistics, examples, stories, and a variety of all these things, but it gives you some things that you can certainly work with. Chances of you using something like statistics on an in-class essay, pretty slim, because you're either making it up, or you got really lucky and it's a perfect topic that you already have some statistics about. But you certainly could go with some examples, reasoning, line of thinking, might even be hypothetical and all those things. So most of our arguments are going to go with that logical approach, that logos. Mentioned this to you already, and jot down what you need to know in order to remember it. This is established with the character of the writer or speaker is believable, trustworthy. It's generally not created by the prose itself, but it's something based on previous impressions or knowledge. I don't know, is there anyone you think of, not necessarily in this room, as if they were to speak, you're going to listen and believe them no matter what? Someone said Albert Einstein first period, which I was like blown away by because I didn't know anyone talked to him still.
A teacher?
It's a very generic answer.
I don't know, just any teacher. I mean, any teacher.
Any teacher.
You could be a mathematician too.
Okay, yeah, and chances are, if you're dealing with something with physics, it would be with the science teacher. If you're talking about quadratic equations, it would be with the math teacher. If the English teacher starts talking to you about chemical properties and periodic table, that ethos might go down a little bit because it's outside of the discipline. But if it's someone who's at least an expert in that field of conversation, yeah, that would make sense.
My pediatrician.
Yeah, that's probably a good one to go with. Doctor, your well-being, is at stake here. So if they have advice for you, that you're probably going to listen to. Certainly not a conversation that you had with a person, but when you were reading "I Have a Dream" speech, Martin Luther King, he has certain credibility that goes along with him. J.D. Salinger might not have credibility, not because you dislike him, but you don't know a whole lot about him. He might have credibility for you if you come across a Salinger short story that you like. He might lack it when Alex comes across a short story if he ends up not being a fan of the way that the book is. Steinbeck's could be in question. You read The Pearl.
That was so bad.
You read East of Eden. I don't know what you think about that one, so. Okay.
I was sad.
What does the prose part mean?
Prose, okay, so when Douglas asked an important question of what we mean by this prose, writing generally breaks down into two categories: poetry, prose. So when you write an essay, you're writing in prose. So this idea about being believable and trustworthy, it's not created by the words, it's created by what the writer or the speaker is bringing to the table. But when we drop the word prose, basically we mean writing, paragraphs, that kind of stuff. However, because you always kind of have to throw this in, a writer's use of source material, logic, etc. could help develop your ethos. So, and I do the best possible job I can so far as being objective throughout the course of the year. If Dylan showcases himself as being a very sound writer throughout, could he conceivably get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to his 17th essay of the year, knowing this whole catalog that he's been able to put together? Yeah, it is potential. The way that you set up an argument in the introduction, in the first body paragraph, in the second body paragraph, that might help you when it comes later on to the conclusion because you've established a certain sense of voice, logic, and whatnot. On an AP exam, it's probably not going to help you. If, let's say, Abby knocks out of the park the very first essay, that's not going to help her on the second essay or the third because you have 3 different readers, a different one for each essay. So it's not they're going to go, she did great on that rhetorical analysis, so we're going to listen to her no matter what on her argument. You got, person A, person B, person C. So that's not really going to happen. But if you set up using valid, credible source material, logic, or whatnot, you might be able to kind of build up an ethos in a way. But probably not to be, the Debbie Downer. Pathos, you're relying on audience participation, which we already talked about. That can be kind of difficult because you're not seeing what that overall reaction is going to be. You're looking to manipulate the listener or the reader through emotions, could be shared values, previous knowledge, attitudes, preconceived notions that they have about certain topics. So that judgment is kind of based on that sway of emotion, which is difficult for you as a writer to use. Because number one, you're not seeing those reactions, and number two, it's an argument. And if it's an argument, there's meant to be logic, there's meant to be rationale, reasonability, all that kind of stuff with it, and pathos doesn't really do that. Now, it can be a nice thing to blend in, you know, overall tone, humor, wit, things like that, can be a nice little icebreaker. But the hope is that that logos ends up being the main structure that you're going, not structure, but the main element of support, the main mode of an argument that you're going to use throughout the course of that kind of essay. And really, this holds true for any kind of writing, you know, whether it's rhetorical analysis, whether it's an argument, whether it's synthesis, which is the third type of essay prompt that we'll take a look at probably in November. Maybe October. See how good we are. We finished Dumb Bunny. Hallelujah. Which means now we switch. Mrs. Kane goes to Sadie, I go over to Addie. Addie doesn't want to be read to. You just got to sit by her and read something. It's pretty easy. Low maintenance. We do. Ryan, are you low maintenance or are you high maintenance? You're high maintenance. Okay. Maddie, high maintenance, low maintenance.
Depends on what the subject matter is.
Sadie, high maintenance. Addie, pretty low maintenance. All right, logos. Already said this. Backbone of the argument. You're looking at a rational appeal to the listener or reader through reasoning. An important part that I don't think I had mentioned yesterday, and I know I didn't say it the first period, so you guys are lucky. Your job when you're creating an argument is not to convince me. Jess could write a very persuasive, a very reasonable, rational approach as to why, you know, from yesterday, Huxley's vision is more relevant in today's world than what Orwell's is. And I could completely disagree with her, because she may not switch my emotion, change my emotion. But I can still recognize that it's a valid argument and completely understand where she's coming from. And if that's the case, mission accomplished. So it's never that you have to change someone's opinion, but it's that essentially you are educating them about the reasoning, the rationale, the approach, the vision, you know, however you want to word it, that you have about that particular issue, topic at hand. There's some things you are just not going to convince somebody of, especially when you're getting into moral dilemmas. You know, if you're even something like that deals with global warming, climate change, you got a couple different perspectives that are in clash. And I'm not trying to like give a generalization of people in this room. Those who look at climate change as being a major problem, what is their primary concern?
That we're all gonna die in
Death.
2050.
Yeah, that's the answer that I was looking for. They are worried about death. Maybe not theirs, depending upon, you know, how old you are or how drastic the climate change is. Could be, you know, who knows? It could be future generations, but it's a life and death matter. And even if you're talking about, you know, animals and certain types of, you know, vegetation and all that stuff, but also humans, life and death. If a person is going, no, climate change is not a big issue, what could be a major reason, value that they are putting above life and death? Could be money. You know, if you're a business owner that, you know, CO2 emissions, all that kind of stuff. No, money. Comfort, convenience, you know, things like that. I'm still going to drive, you know, a car that gets 4.2 miles per gallon on the highway, you know, whatever you say. And if you have this life or death versus convenience argument or money, you're not going to get any kind of agreement, but we can still know where that viewpoint is coming from. So don't worry about changing someone's opinion, but you want to make sure that you can clearly illustrate what your opinion is. Write this one down. This is dramatic. It's a commercial. It will be a commercial. Watch the commercial. It's not one probably that you've seen because this thing's probably dates back to the early 2000s. You'll know the product though, which is good. What do you see in it? Ethos, pathos, logos. Could be and or when it comes to which ones you see. So keep an eye on it.
It's just a black slide.
Not here, it's not. It's there.
Wow, they're old.
Mr. Man, going to work. Guy's tight, got ambition. Middle management is right in his grasp. It's a dream he will never let die. Minister, man of the hour, he's the king of his cue. Status quo reports and finally met their rival. When the candle opens on his way to the top, he knows one day he just could become supervisor.
Starbucks Double Shot Espresso Drink. Written on the day.
You're already imagining they'd have to go Doug and go one syllabus. I imagined it. I keep waiting every day.
What?
Walk down the C hallway, drum kit on the dolly is going to be following me. Get ready for that. What do you see? Ethos, pathos, logo.
Ethos.
Ethos. Also.
Oh wait, no, I lied. I meant to say pathos.
Okay. So you did that little emotional.
Yep.
Okay. Why pathos?
They're trying to make you laugh. You tie the happy emotion to the product.
Okay, so humor. If you're laughing, you're happy. If you're happy, you'll drink a Starbucks espresso, or if you drink a Starbucks double shot espresso, you'll be happy. It's all that emotional thing kind of going on. Any other emotional appeals taking place?
Like that, like confidence, because they say that you're gonna become a supervisor. So if you drink Starbucks, you're just gonna keep moving up in the world.
And even if you're not going to be like office type career, you're still looking to move up, the ladder, so to speak, or whatnot. So this could make you better. What if you're well?
I was gonna say that it's a pretty popular song. Recognize that song and find out.
So, if we're on the other side of the bridge to Terabithia, which is the hallway that goes through Rotunda, we're in Mr. Kern's room. Why is Mr. Kern just going to love this commercial? It's going to take him back to the late 80s, early 90s. His mixtape, we called them Walkmans,
Those
Yeah.
are so
Nostalgia.
cool.
where this will be my warm-up song that I used to get ready for youth football when I would play Shaler. That's William Shakespeare.
No. Oh my god. It looks good.
That's me. Best wedge buster in the Peace Act. Special teams, you can't wedge bust anymore. It's an illegal play now. Whatever. But it's going to take you back to the old happy times of growing up, and so there can certainly be that nostalgic thing. I love Survivor, so therefore I love Double Shot Espresso.
I was going to say people are just going to remember what's going to pop into their head one day, and they're going to laugh, and then they're going to go to Starbucks.
Or even
or
like
even explore.
yeah,
other
or
products
you don't have to
that-
go to Starbucks to buy Starbucks. You could be in Giant Eagle and see a double shot. I remember that, and hey, I'll give it a shot. The song, it could go either way. I mean, it's kind of like a Venn diagram, where those circles overlap. Probably for the song more so in the pathos area. But I mean, hey, if you personally know Survivor, I know them. They would not sell out to corporate America. If they're going to support Starbucks, then it must be a valid thing to do. That could certainly happen. More often than not, probably pathos, but that ethos could be there. The ethos could certainly be there with the name brand. People are kind of laughing a little bit. You do see the Starbucks logo at the very beginning on the can, but it's fairly grainy, so you might not have noticed it. But at the end, when the Starbucks logo shows up, I love Starbucks. I'm addicted to Starbucks. I must try that because Starbucks made it. There's that instant credibility that would be happening right there. So it could be the song, also could be the product. Any logos? Any logical, rational? Could be a stretch. What's the drink? Espresso, not just espresso. Double shot espresso. So this isn't just like that little bit of caffeine that you'd be drinking to get yourself going. This is a double shot. So I'm not going to say I'll be double productive, but there might be more energy for that first period, honors sugar and pre-calc class period that I need to fight through, or CHS business calc, whatever the case may be. Like, you have your own desk, right? Okay, just making sure.
With another person who will potentially travel.
Jess is like squatting in Mr. Clark's CHS calc class. Like, she just kind of took over. I like picture you rolling out of the tent like in the morning, getting ready. I might be wrong, but that's what I picture. Might be faulty, but it's logical to an extent. Penguins are black and white. Some old TV shows are black and white. Therefore, some penguins are old TV shows. Transitive property at its finest. Who says penguins aren't logical? Self-explanatory.
Or what about the part from the one?
I'm sorry?
He didn't say that.
You're calling Abraham Lincoln a liar?
No,
President Abraham
I was
Lincoln?
thinking of the part from the one.
Honest Abe?
But I was thinking of the one part from Bill and Ted's where he says, "Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes."
So he's in Hollywood films. He knows Socrates. Or Socrates, depending upon
So
pronunciation. And Beethoven and Freud. He knows all these people. So it's not what he is saying, but it is who it is that credibility comes through, and that's the ethos. All right. Daniel knows that Caesar was a salad dressing dude.
does.
Joan of Arc? Noah's wife. No.
If you haven't seen the movie, you don't get it.
Ted, don't be
The greatest upset of that movie is after watching it, who would have thought that Keanu Reeves would ever be in another movie? And
Or
like
that they make a second
create
one.
well that was I don't know.
Ted
the existence of that
Theodore
one.
Logan.
Alright, here we're getting into the fallacy stage. Okay, so these are things that you want to avoid. And the problem with logical fallacies is you generally don't know that you are using them. Especially in the context of AP English language and composition, because you're not arguing with someone. Sometimes you might use a logical fallacy to trap a person, parent, sibling, teacher, depending upon what the conversation is. But when you're doing it in essay form, you're not trying to really convince someone to change their perspective. So you fall into sometimes the rabbit hole of a logical fallacy where you're kind of making an assumption that really logically doesn't hold together. So making a generalization on the basis of an inadequate sample of evidence, I don't want to say that all inductive reasoning is bad, but it tends to be a case of inductive reasoning gone bad. You have inductive and you have deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is when you start with a principle, and so you narrow it down to something specific. All men are jerks. Sorry, all males are jerks. Tori was looking at Daniel. Therefore, Daniel's a jerk.
No.
Inductive reasoning would be the opposite. Daniel's a jerk, therefore all males are jerks. Could be true, but that one tends to have a little bit more of a flaw to it. First day of my junior year was utterly disastrous. The rest of the year won't be much better. This is a hasty generalization because that one day of school is an inadequate sample size. It very well could prove to be true. So if you were to go, the first 21 days of my junior year have been disastrous, this year's going to be terrible, you have a larger sample size that maybe you can start to extrapolate it. But to simply go one day, one instance, one experience, therefore this is the case all the time, that's going to be a flaw in reasoning. All right? So it's the easiest definition because it is what it is. It's a hasty generalization. You're making a general statement without having enough reason that you're really looking at. False cause. Assuming one event caused another just because it preceded it, just because it came first. Probably the easiest way to think about this would be superstitions, and that might seem like a little, far-fetched, but if you are superstitious, it's because of false cause. So if not that it has to be only to athletes, we all have our superstitions, but if you have to put like the left shoe on before the right shoe, or you have to have something for breakfast in order to perform better on math test, or a volleyball match or whatever, that's false cause. If I eat a mandarin orange for breakfast, I will not perform well in the very competitive faculty basketball game. And I know this is true because it happened one time. Alex, no more mandarin oranges. Any pregame rituals? Okay, so we got a certain routine that you have to go. So if you're a routine person, sometimes it could be false cause. Now, can one event cause another? Yes. I punch Asia in the nose. Her nose bleeds. It's probably not a false cause. But to assume that two things automatically are linked just because one came before the other would be a false cause. Honestly, the best realm to look at is politics because you'll see these things coming up all the time. I'm going to Columbus this weekend. I really am, promise. Think we're going to check out the zoo. Haven't been there before. So I'm going to drive probably around 300 miles would be my guess, like round trip for the weekend. Because I'm going to Columbus, what happened? That I'm not happy about. Specifically,
The attacks.
gas prices have gone up. There was a drone attack in Saudi Arabia because they knew I was going to Columbus this weekend, and now the prices are already going up. BP was at $3.14 yesterday. That would be a false cause. To assume that I'm of such importance that a drone attack occurred, which caused oil prices to go up, there's no relation between those things. It's total coincidence. I'm wearing a white shirt. What's bound to happen? I'm going to spill my coffee on it, but not here, not now. Slippery slope is kind of like false cause to the exponential growth. Assuming that if a certain step is taken, a whole series of undesirable consequences is going to follow. So Stella fails her reading check quiz on Friday. Then she's going to fail this class, flunk out of school, embarrass parents and family, remain unemployed, and be a burden to society for the remainder of her days on this planet. So long as global warming does not kill us first.
It's smart that you chose me for that one. 'Cause I can type that loud.
What's the difference between false cause and slippery slope? There's a couple. It's not like just one. Douglas?
This one's looking more into the future, but for false cause, you're looking at the past.
Yeah,
Give
false
blame.
cause they've happened. So you're looking for a relationship of these events that have happened. This one, assuming that if a step is taken in the future, undesirable consequences. You elect this person president, then this will happen. You're foretelling the future, which you can't do. False cause could be because you elected this person president, your dog died. Hopefully not. That would most likely be false cause. And then the other thing being false cause, you're looking at not isolate, but you're looking at two instances, slippery slope, think domino effect. Remember the DirecTV commercials? I think it was DirecTV a couple years ago, where if you use cable, you'll end up in a roadside ditch, in the middle of nowhere. Those were slippery slope kind of things. If you do this is going to happen. False analogy, if you're a sibling, you probably have dealt with this. Going beyond simply pointing out a resemblance between two things or situations, to claim that the things or situations or people are the same or call for the same response. So if you're the younger sibling, and your teacher went, I remember the older sibling. Never want to see that person again. They could hold that against you. I think we have 4 siblings in here that I've taught. Never had Andrew, but I won Jeopardy when he was, so that's a good thing. So that's a positive one.
Probably my brother in 2 years.
Will.
Yeah.
Okay, so he'll be dealing with the false analogy. Zach was okay. Rebecca Yu was like best person ever. Never met a person I like more than her.
My grandparents.
This is
thought
a disappointment so far this year.
My grandparents thought you were cool, by the way. They watched your thing. They were like, he seems like a cool guy.
What did they watch?
We showed them the Jeopardy.
Oh.
And they were like, seems cool.
Legal penalties for the mistreatment of animals should be as severe as the penalties for the mistreatment of children. Both animals and children depend on humans for kindness and nurture. This isn't to say that there should not be punishments for mistreatment, but I bet if you ask the average person which should be a more severe penalty, they'll probably go mistreatment of children. Okay? So to say it would be the same thing would be a false analogy. Stella gets arrested. Stella gets arrested for,
Counterfeit.
okay,
Thanks, man. You're welcome.
first period was murder. So counterfeiting's not bad.
Yeah.
Paige gets arrested for murder. They both are arrested, they both broke the law. Should the punishments be the same for both? Most would say no.
I mean, I murdered somebody, but
We can be roommates. It'll be fun.
Maximum security, maybe minimum security kind of thing. So false analogy, just because there's one similarity doesn't mean it's going to be the same thing all throughout. Douglas?
So you're taking two things at the end of the spectrum and you're
They don't have to be at the end of the spectrum, but you find at least one common trait. So when we talk about siblings, name, DNA, all that kind of stuff, it could be a stereotype. So like if a person is biased or prejudiced against a group of people, if someone has that trait, they're automatically going to discount them. If you're looking at it like in a historical perspective, say the factors that led up to the Vietnam War, you see those things happening again in another part of the world, and you go, we should not get involved because the Vietnam War did not work out so well. That would also be false analogy. There might be a lot of similarities, but you can't predict, you can't say that they're going to end exactly the same way. For the procrastinators out there, which would be everyone raising their hand, I did really well when I pulled that all-nighter on that essay. Like, it was awesome. So for that bio test coming up, I think I'm just going to pull an all-nighter again, and everything will work out well. It's probably going to catch up at some point. Diana's waiting for the world to come crashing down. Oops, we didn't talk about black and white. Black and white reasoning, also you can call it either-or reasoning, arguing that there's only two choices. Douglas, since you were talking about end of the spectrum, this would be something where end of the spectrum. There are only two outcomes, and one is correct because the other is unthinkable, terrible, unfathomable. There's a couple problems with it. One, you can't say something is going to be correct because the other one is bad. That's kind of limiting it. And more so, how many solutions are you saying are plausible? Only two. And usually most problems have more possible outcomes than just two. Now, Paige has heard this before. She's well aware if she goes to Temple University, which she's never going to go to, and she gets threatened with a gun to her head, your money or your life, you're not going to go black or white reasoning, sir or ma'am. Are you going to Temple? That seemed to hit home for you.
No.
Okay.
Wait, what's wrong with temples?
Everything.
Jonah might go to Temple.
Jonah White, Rebecca's talking about it. Number one, who wants to be an owl? Like Temple owls?
Owls are wise.
Come on. City of brotherly love? Yeah.
I've been to Philly before.
Sorry, Mr. Hosa, but
Okay, I'm actually
what's that?
Just get me out right
No,
now.
temples are
IUP,
good.
IUP is a big one. IUP and Cal. Hey, 1998, 98? 99. 98, Sports Center top 10, Hail Mary play at home against IUP. We were on
I'm like
ESPN.
90% of Hollywood like quoted my mom. She went to be a high school English teacher.
Was her maiden name?
Rank her.
I don't know.
But I also
Could be.
She dropped, but she ended up getting drawn.
She was absent, but I'll grab that thing next. Yeah.
I need some freaking Advil or something. Wait, do I have to have a doctor's excuse for